Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here, and Stockholm is beautiful as ever. And thank you, Andrea, for the wonderful introduction. And also, Michael Bauscher, the barrister, very, very good introduction to my presentation, because I am going to also talk about remedies. I had planned to begin my presentation with stating that overall the remedy system is quite effective and successful. I'm a bit afraid to say that now after Michael Bauscher's presentation, but so I will maybe continue on with the part of however after the successful statement that I had planned. The reason why I chose to speak about remedies in public procurement I have two reasons. First is that in recent years, I have been doing quite a lot of research in this subject. There is a wonderful book project writing commentaries on the EU public procurement directives. And I was very lucky to be one of the authors involved in the project. And I was writing namely the part of commentaries on the remedies directives. The book has taken some time to be published, but now the editors, Professors Steineck and Westeldorf from Denmark, have assured all the writers that hopefully in February 2018 the commentaries will be published. So I hope that they will be of use. Now, of course, in the process of writing commentaries on remedies directive, one looks a lot at the case law of the European Court of Justice. And in addition to looking at the details of application of every single article in the remedies directives, you tend to get an overall picture of how the system seems to be working, and if there are any gaps, any problems that seem to dominate in this area. And that is where I was going to say that while overall the system seems to be functioning well, it is generally possible to really achieve or get the rapid and effective review that the directives say you have to. And that is very important because we know the remedies in public procurement have this two purposes, the dual purpose of protecting both the individual concerned person, the unsuccessful bidder mostly, and on the other hand, protecting the abstract ideas or the purposes of public procurement law in general, competition, free movement, non-discrimination, etc. So in order to this system to work, it really needs to be very, very effective. However, there are some issues that I think need attention. And these issues I would divide into three groups. Firstly, there are some problems or to me, they seem like gaps in the remedies regulation. And these gaps have been there already earlier. So that's the past. Already when we had the previous public procurement directives from the year 2004, these gaps in the legislation of remedies existed. Now, the second group of issues, I think, arrived with the arrival of the new 2014 public procurement directives. We know, and there have been lots of presentations in this conference also in the subject, that there are some quite significant changes brought about by these new public procurement directives that by now are implemented in all of the European Union, even in Estonia since this autumn, finally. And there are some instruments in the new directives that did not exist under the old ones. And I'm referring, of course, to contract modification rules, the option of contract termination for the contracting authority, and the new tool of self-cleaning. So it is not clear at all how these new tools interact with the existing remedies system, or if they interact at all. And thirdly, to move a little bit into the future, I think that the remedies system as such, because it was created in 1989 and 1992, these remedies directives, it's a totally different world. It does not take into account the e-procurement that the whole of the European Union must be involved in a year. It does not take into account the electronic possibilities that could make the system actually much more quick, much more effective, or just look at some issues that maybe worked all right during the older times, but should be reviewed in the context of electronic procurement. So just to give some examples, again, the issue of damages. As Michael Bauscher was describing, there are significant differences in the member states' legislation and in the culture or legal culture of member states. So the actual employment of these possibilities is very diverse. And besides these cultural differences, this is also fortified by the remedies directives, because obviously the remedies directive give member states the full freedom to establish the rules on damages, provided that the rules are equivalent, meaning not discriminating, and that they are effective. Okay? So on the one hand, the directive gives the freedom. On the other hand, there are decisions of the European Court of Justice that have been limiting this freedom in different issues. When in the case of speaker, the court actually confirmed that yes, as long as the member state's law provides that damages are available when there is a causal link between the sufficiently serious breach and the damages caused, then the member states have the freedom to establish the rules how to determine the damages and how to estimate or calculate the damages. Now, there are other two cases I've written on the slides, the Medieval and Strabag, that have restricted this freedom quite significantly with regard to the deadlines in case of Medieval, and in case of Strabag, the court actually said that because the remedies directives do not refer to the standard of fault with regard to avoiding damages, member states are not free to establish this standard either. What this brings us to is that because damages are dependent, or award of damages is dependent on so many invariables. The access to court, firstly, the significance of the breach, the culpability standards, which we now know from Strabag that shouldn't be applied. And finally, of course, the calculation of damages. Is the profit not received, for instance, compensable at all? So these can create drastically different results in different member states, which I think is not the idea of the directives. Yes, if we have a member state where basically it is not possible to achieve any kind of damages, then I don't think that the short article in the directive saying that damages should be available is not fulfilled. Just an example. So we have two kinds of problems with this gap on remedies. Firstly, we have confusion, what the member states' freedom really is. And secondly, we have a very, very big differences between the member states. Another group of examples now concerns these new directives. For instance, in the case of unlawful modification of a contract. We know from the previous case law and from the text of the directives that it is possible to declare a contract ineffective in case of unlawful modification. However, what is not clear is who can have access to the courts. It is also not clear what it is that will be ineffective. Is it the whole contract? Or is it sometimes maybe only the part that was modified, that was maybe added? And furthermore, are any other remedies available? Can we apply the interim interlocutory measures? Can we claim that the decision to change the contract would be set aside? Are damages available? And if then, in what scope? That is not resolved in the directives. So whenever a member state makes these rules, again, it's only for this member state, and it can be drastically different from the other states, putting the bidders in different countries in very different situations. The same problem concerns also the remedies for termination under Article 73 and the new remedy of self-cleaning, or the new tool of self-cleaning, I would say. Okay, and thirdly, to move from the problems and gaps and unclarities into a bit more positive things. It seems to me that in the remedy system, we actually have a potential that has not been used as much as it could, at least on the level of the European Union, and that concerns the electronic procurement. On the one hand, we know that in a year, all the member states have to have 100% electronic procurement. The procurement directives demand that. The preparations in, I believe, many states have been made, even though maybe not 100% of the member states. But the remedies directives have not received any attention in light of this. Does the use of only electronic procurement make the terms for remedies somehow different? Should we make some changes to make the remedy system even more effective and flexible? I can give you some examples on that. Because in Estonia we have had the electronic procurement system for quite a long time already. By now it's definitely over 90%, so close to 100%. So in the course of accepting the new law that now implements the new public procurement directives, we had, for instance, the argument or claims or two different possibilities considered with regard to the deadlines. If there is an open procedure, a public procurement in open procedure, and an interested party wants to challenge the contract documents, when should the deadline for the limitation period start? In electronic procurement, is it best to have it start at the moment that the contract documents are published in the electronic procurement register, as the directive actually says, from the moment of publishing? Or should it maybe be more efficient to calculate the time particular for every interested party who wants to submit the claim? In the first case, we would definitely have more legal certainty, while under the second option, it would perhaps be more just towards this particular person. Now, we came up in the law with a third option, actually, a compromise that is now in the form of the law, and it ties the deadline not to the moment of publishing the documents, but to the moment when the deadline for submitting tenders arrives. Okay? And this is a moment or a rule that is very much depending on the system of electronic procurement. If you have the options to verify when anybody accesses the system and downloads the contract documents, then of course it makes more sense to use the second option. Now, if you have a system where anybody, without registering or identifying himself, can access the register, it is more useful to use the first one. So just an example. And the chosen compromise in our law is actually in conformity with the directives, because the deadlines for submitting tenders are always longer. So the 10-day limit is not breached. Another moment with regard to the e-procurement, maybe we could have even a vision for the e-review in remedies directives or under the national laws. For instance, what we have done with regard to review systems, we have a special review body for public procurement cases, not the usual courts. So often, when a person submits a claim to the review body, and it is submitted electronically to the review body, then there are no accompanying documents. You do not have to print out the contract documents, the letters that you have exchanged with the contracting authority, whatever, because at the moment that the review body receives the claim, it is also granted special rights to access the public procurement system and to verify all the steps that have been taken to access all the documents that are relevant in order to solve this case. So it is not a 100% rule, because in cases like, for instance, when you have a claim concerning abnormally low tender, you probably have to submit something extra, showing that your tender is not abnormally low. As is with damages. Of course, you would have to show your damages, and you cannot see that from the procurement register. However, in most cases, it makes the process much easier. It saves the environment by leaving out the printing of the papers, and should be inconsistent with the purpose of the remedies directives. And of course, the decisions are also published in the same register. So we do have the overview of all the complaints that have been submitted in public procurement cases and all the results. You can find them in one place. Now, knowing all this and having all these concerns in my head, I was, of course, a little disappointed when I read the Commission's report that came out in January this year, and that evaluated the effectiveness of the remedy system. Because the Commission basically decided that the remedy system seems to be working okay enough. It has no major or urgent problems. That's a citation. So the conclusion of the report was not to amend the remedies directives, but instead make the existing problems or gaps better by two ways. First, giving guidance by the Commission, and the second tool was to facilitate more interaction between the first instance review bodies. Now, I am not sure that the guidance is a proper means in this case. And there are two kinds of concerns. Firstly, what is the effect of a guidance by the European Commission? Does it have any compulsory force? I do not think it has. The member states would have the obligation, or the contracting authorities or the judges would have the obligation to follow the guidance. Well, they can do it. It is very good if they get any use from it, but it is far from the force of a directive. And secondly, to me it seems that most of the problematic issues in the remedies directive are in the questions that the Commission cannot advise on. For instance, in the case of damages, the directive clearly establishes that the member states have the power to introduce these rules. So it is not up to the Commission to prescribe new rules in this regard. And if we take the enforcement of the new directives or the specific articles of new directives that do not have a clear counterpart in way of remedies, the modification, termination, and self-cleaning, again, because the remedies directives do not give any mention of remedies that are available in these cases, the Commission cannot take this power either. So this is the weak part of the guidance. Of course, it can be a positive effect also, at least in the form of gathering the information that is out there and available. So these were my thoughts that I wanted to share with you. Maybe there are people among you who know what to do with my concerns, whom to talk to. I feel that there is actually a strong need that the remedies directives should be reviewed, either by way of supplementing them or making new ones. But we will have to wait and see. So thank you very much for the attention. Thank you.